welcome back to The Path Forward, Mental Health with Maps. Today, I'm so pleased to be joined by Jocelyn Goldblatt, Executive Director of the Cheshire Children's Museum, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating opportunities for children and families to learn, connect, and grow through play. In this episode, we'll be talking about adverse childhood experiences, often called ACEs, and the ways early stress and trauma can shape a child's development, relationships, emotion regulation, and long-term physical and mental health. Jocelyn will also be sharing from her own lived experience what it means to carry a high ACEs score from childhood. We won't be discussing the specific details of those experiences, but we will be talking about their impact and about the post-traumatic growth and resilience that can emerge when children and adults are met with connection, safety, and support. We'll also explore the powerful role of play. Play is sometimes treated as something light, extra, or simply fun, but it is actually one of the essential ways children learn, build relationships, process experience, regulate emotion, and make sense of the world around them. And play is not only for childhood. Across the lifespan, play can support mental health, creativity, connection, flexibility, joy, and cognitive health. So welcome to the table, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Yeah. So play is one of the pieces of mental health that I think does not get spoken about a lot, and yet it is so integral to the work that happens here at MAPS all the time and to what's happening over at the Children's Museum as well. So we'll get there, but first where I wanted to lay some foundational work for our listeners is I wanted to talk about that notion of ACEs. And so when did that first come into your awareness as an adult, that there was this notion that there's something called adverse childhood experiences?
So it goes all the way back to my undergraduate degree in studying health economics and how those chronic long-term illnesses are behavioral based, but that's not to say that it's the fault of the people doing the behaviors. It's to say that there is a potential for the environment to impact our well-being, and it's really relational based. And so when I look at how we do community in our dominant culture, there's so much room for growth and improvement. And so for me, that local digital currency had the potential to help us practice doing transactions with each other that were actually more relational based, not profit based, but building community relational based in the way that we can support each other and see each other through all the good times and the bad times and build on that. And so what actually happened was I started to do that project, I felt insecure. I felt like all the imposter syndrome stuff I was avoiding. I was procrastinating. I was projecting ideas about myself that weren't coming from other people, but they felt like they were. And so I really had to look at what was going on with myself. And so like somehow those two things ended up weaving together, and I found the ACEs study, and then I kind of did the praxis, I was practicing, studying, applying, learning. And in that process, I realized I really needed to address that for myself before I could move on to the next thing, because I wasn't going to be fully present for the projects that I wanted to do in community if I wasn't taking care of myself. So I just shifted my whole project to be about ACEs and how they impact people and how community can create circumstances for thriving and support people growing through and beyond those things, and how we can identify the strengths that people bring when they come from those kinds of circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of a pathway into a lot of human service work for a lot of folks, is that, so to make sure everyone who's listening understands what ACEs are, the ACEs study was a long-term study taking a look at a whole host of adverse childhood experiences that kids could have, and kind of quantifying numerically the stressor of all of that. And it can be a lot of different things. So somebody could have a low level ACEs, things like lots of moves and relocations and having to start at new schools, combined with, a handful of other things that were not necessarily someone physically hurting them, but a lot of those stressors racked up over time increases the ACEs score. And then there are other things that maybe are more interpersonal violence and things like that absolutely make that score much, much higher immediately. And when they took a look at the effect of those stressors on human beings into adulthood, it actually showed impact, not just psychologically, but also physical health outcomes, higher rates of cardiovascular disease and things like that. And so it's worthwhile as a society to be doing something about it. And so those of us who've had higher ACEs scores throughout childhood seem to be a bit motivated. It seems one of the directions we all tend to go in, to be a bit motivated to do something about that on a community-based level. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened for you, is that it resonated for you and you could feel the impact of maybe that having a higher ACEs score from childhood as you were navigating your professional life. And you could kind of start to see that. So when you were describing that some of the thinking patterns you were having and the reactions you were having, how were you able to discern that wasn't just everybody around you and that was something maybe coming from an earlier part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something that I had learned over time regardless, and it came from wanting to break those cycles of interpersonal violence and harm in my own family, and realizing that just because I decided I wanted it to be different didn't mean that it was just going to overnight be different, that those patterns lived inside of me and that they would come up in times that were not appropriate for raising children in the ways that I wanted to, that my behavior wasn't aligning with my intention and that I had a less of a feeling of control over that than I really wanted to have. And so I needed to do that work. And so there was a lot of self-reflection and a lot of Buddhist practices of meditation and self-reflection and a lot of learnings that went into breaking those patterns internally. So it wasn't new to me that to know that I had to check myself before I start messing with my environment. That it's always going to be that what's going on in my body first, what's, all of that awareness already was there. I just wasn't aware of the specifics of the ACEs study. And then when I saw the score, it was so much easier to talk about because I could just say, I have a high ACE score. I didn't have to trauma dump on anybody or say, this is what happened to me, although I still did that from time to time. So that awareness grew over time out of a motivation to break those cycles and to have my children experience better, moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of those automatic responses that we sometimes have are perfect places and entry points for that self-reflection. And it doesn't need to be a perfect process. And the having the conceptualization of the ACEs is really helpful in being able to really help folks understand that it's not a matter of just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and deal with what you had to deal with and you'll be well and healthy. Like it truly has impact, on a cellular level for our health and well-being across our lifespan. And it is a nice way of being able to communicate. And the concept of trauma dumping is something I find kind of fascinating because there's, I think young folk, teenagers in this day and age are trying to figure out where those lines are as well. Because there's definitely a moment where it's the right time and place to share the details and to work through things and to digest things, and it creates a depth of healing that's really beautiful. And then there's another time and place where where the person who's sharing doesn't actually get what they need in response. And that's how I kind of, in my mind, think about, if what we are sharing is overwhelming the person in front of us because they don't actually have the skill set to help us work through it, then maybe we need to pull back. And I've navigated that in my own life as well, where in a introverted, deep desire to connect with another human being, as an introvert, I like to connect deeply, and I don't spend a lot of time on the surface level conversation, which can trip you up a little bit. And then add on to that a high ACEs score. And what I thought was potentially connecting with another human being really overwhelmed them.
Yep.
And then I could see them glaze over and it can't be unsaid now.
Yep, and then it changes the way they view you and interact with you for a long time after that. So I agree. There's this tension between those two things, as you said, and there's also things you pointed out, but there's also that whole generation of people who didn't talk about things, didn't address things. And so there's a part of me that was always a little bit rebellious and say, we need to address this. We need to look at it and talk about it. And so sometimes people are uncomfortable when you do that. So it is a discernment, development of discernment when that's actually going to have a positive outcome that moves you towards the vision you have for the future, and when that's actually going to make you take a side quest that you do really have time or energy for.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And then an additional layer on that too is it's all this both and or all and that, yes, the individual who carries the higher ACEs score through their life has to work on kind of discerning where are the safe places to be vulnerable and productive places to be vulnerable, and to share actual details, and where to maybe hold that back a little bit. And then as a society and as individuals, we need to stretch ourselves to keep expanding our capacity to be trauma-informed and to understand that people are moving through the world with different experiences, and to hold each other with a greater empathy and compassion. And so like all of that happening at the same time. And so that's where like the intersection into community starts to happen for me, and where I feel like, okay, we can affect some change on some level. And so I know when you and I have talked a little bit about the Children's Museum, on the surface, it seems like just a beautiful children's museum, but it has so many other layers to it for you and what your vision is for that organization, and how you see it as a place where potentially there's a lot of possibility of beginning to disrupt some of those intergenerational patterns that create those higher ACEs scores. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, not only that, but the response to it and the space that's held and available for it. So being a safe, inclusive space is a lot more complicated than it might sound, because it's all, in a household, in relationships, there is always that boundary negotiation, and there's always, every parent, I believe, and I could be wrong, I don't know every parent, but I think most parents who are trying to do their jobs are thinking about, what am I carrying forward that has value, and what am I shedding and leaving behind that may have caused harm or doesn't have value in this current environment, or, for our family's needs. And every family is different. It comes families come in all shapes and sizes, and it's about working together to make it a pleasant experience for everyone. And I think the way that our dominant culture does not support positive family experiences and sort of puts a lot of pressure on parents and takes a lot of time and energy away from parents having that time with their children. There's so much judgment. There's so much, expectations that maybe aren't really reasonable and are rooted in unhealthy things from the past. So having a space where you come as you are, and there are, ways in which, if you're learning, it's okay to not be perfect. And also we can practice sharing a space together. We can practice being mindful of how we're impacting other people. We can maybe get some help with something that we aren't quite skilled at, that we didn't, to carry forward from our childhood. That's sort of a gap that we can either observe other people, or maybe there's a way in which professionals or even just peers can come together and be more intentional about that, I guess is my point. So having that be actually part of the vision and the mission for the museum, and creating that space where people are expected to be working and growing and learning and not always getting everything right, feels really good to me, especially if we can have fun while we're doing it. Not have everything, progress, not perfection, right?
Progress, not perfection. And the fun piece. And that's when I hear, as a psychologist, when I hear that there are spaces in the community that are with intention, creating those experiences for children and families where it's fun, where the growth is happening, but it's playful. That's music to my ears. So much of the work that I do in my daily life here at the organization is play-based. And on the surface, if somebody looks at it, they might kind of wonder what on earth is happening. And so knowing that play is the work of childhood, play truly is the work of childhood. But there are so many conflicting messages coming at us, whether it's on social media or, pressures to perform in this society, pressures to achieve, all sorts of things like that make it seem like something different should be happening. When in all reality, a child and a parent engaged in play together, especially when it's directed by the kid. And the kiddo is the one who's, creating the play themes and making some decisions and holding some control in those moments. When that can happen and the parent is right alongside them, something organic and natural happens to the depth of the bond those two have. And so much of what we do in our office is that folks who come into their parenting with a greater trauma load or interpersonal violence they've experienced, or years upon years of being told that they weren't good enough, play is hard.
Yeah.
And we want them to play because it creates the bond with the child.
Can I point out something that's really hard and needs to be said is that oftentimes people with bad intentions use play as a way to groom a child and to bait them into something that turns out to be harmful and that lives in the parent's body. So there's a conflict when they're trying to have fun and let go. That can get in the way. So not having addressed those things can be really tough.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is actually, as we're kind of dancing around the things we were wanting to talk about today, that right there is the crux of it. As we're talking about the things that live inside the parent's body and live inside the parent's experience, that get in the way of their ability to then offer the caregiving they really desperately want to offer to their child.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the empowerment that comes from being able to play, which is to imagine, right? Try things, have things go either as you expected or not as you expected, and start over or adjust and make that the game. And there's so much opportunity there. It's really empowering because then you can take it out in the real world and say, oh, I do have this power of envisioning something different for the future and working towards it and working through whatever unexpected thing arises as I move through. So.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful and empowering. So one of the concepts that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today in relation to play and trauma and high ACEs scores and parenting and all of that is there's a concept in our field that's, we call it the ghosts and the angels in the nursery. So the angels in the nursery are the positive care receiving experiences we had in our childhoods that we then transmit into our own caregiving. So it's the way those positive experiences then pass down to the next generation. So I think in my own life, whenever I was ill, my mother, she always made homemade soup if I was sick. Like that was a thing that she did. And the receiving of it there's the deep nurturing. And that was something I carried into my own parenting. It definitely is like there's this concept of like there's some love that comes through the creation of food and the provision of food. And then the ghosts in the nursery are the negative care receiving experiences we had that we then very unconsciously transmit onto our kids. And so it can be something like someone using play harmfully. And then we've internalized that, using play as a way to take advantage and to harm. That then when, so for, a provider is then saying to a parent, you need to play with your kid, 5 minutes of play will help with bonding. It's now complicated for that individual in a different way. Yeah. In your own experience of the shedding of some of the things you no longer needed, some of those negative care receiving experiences that you had, how did you've alluded to some things that you did. Is there anything that you can offer that were really impactful practices that help you with the shedding specifically so that you could be there for your children in a different way?
I mean, I always have found that the time that I give myself for meditation and contemplation is the most valuable to take that space around those things and build it into when they arise in the future. So just that little gap of space takes a lot of practice outside of the event to be prepared for the next event, if that makes sense.
I know it makes it makes perfect sense. It's the whole reason why so many therapists do suggest mindfulness-based practices and meditation is because if you practice that outside of the moment where something's happening, it really does help our nervous system so that in the moment when something is activating us, maybe one of those early experiences is being energized within us, and that we can then automatically have a little more space to ground ourselves and to think versus it being a super automatic thought.
Right. And knowing that because those harms take away your sense of power. They take away your idea that you have choice, that you have control over things. And so creating that space where you have the ability to respond to the things that are arising in the way that needed to be responded to during the original event or events really is that healing taking place within yourself. And you don't really need anybody else or anything else to do that. You actually have that at all times, available to you. But it's just, it takes a long time to create the space where you can see that and believe that and know that and work with that.
Yeah, and that notion that it takes time and that it's important to have a whole lot of grace with yourself, that it's going to, that this is not going to be a perfect process. And that's a powerful message to send to children too. When the parent acknowledges that they are not perfect and that this is not going to be a perfect process. And we do that subtly by the way children see us talk about ourselves and so on. And the way we, apologize to a child when it's necessary to apologize to a child. It's a pretty powerful lesson.
It is.
To have. I think about busy families and, so we're talking about high ACEs scores, but there's not just high ACEs scores. There's the reality that there's busy families, a million different competing demands, financial strain, so many things that can make it so that sitting down and playing with a child is not top of mind, not highest priority. And then I think too about the spaces that are available to step outside of the distractions. And that makes me think about the Children's Museum.
That's right.
Yeah. What do you witness when you see families together there?
Yeah, I witness the whole range of, what do you want to call that? The whole range of states of being with families. Because in order to take that space to play and relax and enjoy each other's company, all of those stressors you have to have that skill to put them aside and be fully present. And so sometimes I do witness parents who don't have that capacity yet, and they tend to want to avoid or check out. And so they want to go sit down and be on their phone. Or I see them really needing adult connection. And so they let their kids go bond with other kids, and then they have that adult connection, which is really helpful in healing. And then I see the parents who are super engaged with their kids and get right down in the imagination and the play and the experimentation and what happens when we do this and what if we add that and tell me where this goes and, that just really doing the thing. And that always is really uplifting for me to witness and to be able to hold space for. And I think there's some room for us to grow our programming around meeting all three of those needs: the need to have space for yourself, the need to connect with other adults and be in an adult mindset and bonding and creating relationships that support you. And then also having that time with the kids to engage completely and maybe facilitating that for the parents who are working on learning how to do that. So right now it's just sort of all open, and there's programs, take it or leave it kind of programs, but I would really like to have more targeted and intentional programming to support the whole range of where people are with their parents. As much as I can get people to be able to have those experiences where they are bonded and connected and in the flow of play and imagination and creativity, that's what I want for everyone. So
it's beautiful. Oh, it's beautiful. No, it's beautiful. And I think that's the idea, is that we do know, what type of connection between a parent and child helps to support that child thriving in life and to help the parent thrive as a parent. And it's not always readily accessible, like you, and I appreciate that you recognize the full range of experience a parent might have, and that each space, whether it's needing time for yourself, needing time to connect to adults, or being right in it with your child, that those are each valid states of parenting, and that meeting people where they are is so very important. And then for each of us as individuals, making sure that as we experience the various judgments of our society, that perhaps we can focus on meeting the particular need that we have, which will then help us be ultimately more available to our child.
The other thing that I witness is about how we caretake space and shared spaces, because some families
tell me more about that.
are really like part of what you're doing as an adult is training your kid to be able to manage a household and manage their own life when they've separated from you, fully individuated and become their own independent people. And so when you're in those spaces that are shared spaces, you're sort of practicing that, right? And it's an opportunity to start getting the kids to have those habits of being mindful about how what you do in a space impacts the other children and the other people in that space. We have the rules, walking feet, inside voices, things that keep everybody safe, and things that make it accessible to everybody to get. Like when you show up at an exhibit and everything is out of place, then you're not getting the same experience as when the last family showed up at the space and everything was set for you to start your play and end your play. And, you know, some kids bounce all over the place, so it depends on where they are in their development spectrum. But I do see some parents feeling not engaged in that process while they're in that space and not aware that that's an opportunity to practice how we work together in shared spaces and how we impact other people. So that's something that we're working on, figuring out how to enforce the rules in a way that actually grows the capacity for us to have community and to have shared resources, because I think we're just moving towards a time when shared resources are going to be more valuable. We get into the politics of
but shared, but the notion that like when we share, that when we all take care of each other and ourselves and our own little family units, but that we view, like that I view your children as someone, as valuable humans, and I will take care of them too because they are my fellow citizens. That's a very different world than I'm just going to take care of my own little family.
Right. And you got paid. I paid to come here so you can clean up after me, or you can deal with the thing that my kid broke. Things break all the time. It's not our responsibility. Like, where are we responsible for one another? Where are we responsible for teaching our kids that we're responsible for our impact on the people around us? And I'm sure in the household, in my household, that's an ongoing negotiation process. Like, how much is my stuff in your way and how much is your stuff in my way, and how important is it to me how I'm impacting you with my habits, and how much can we expect each other to work on our habits, and how much is being controlling and demanding, and again, those tensions, and working through that as a family unit then extends out into the community. And we do see that at the museum. For sure.
Oh, it sounds like you do. And I wonder too about, my experience has been a parent who maybe is new to the concept that play is the work of childhood, and that there's a lot to be gleaned through the act of playing and doing something like cleaning up, that there's actually transferable skills that last a lifetime. That when parents are not aware of that concept, but then become aware of that concept, they often feel empowered and feel like, oh, wait, if I do this particular thing with my kid, because my experience also has been that parents are deeply worried about making sure their children are okay for the future. And that the highest anxiety parents often have is, who's going to take care of my child if something happens to me? Or will this child be able to sustain their living and connect with others once they are grown? And when parents find out that doing something as simple as facilitating a process of cleaning up with a 5-year-old helps to lay the groundwork for being able to eventually live with other people, that sometimes that helps bridge the gap a little bit about why it's valuable.
Right.
And then there's a greater level of engagement.
And sometimes parents are carrying generations of unhealthy ways of negotiating how we use our spaces and power dynamics and all kinds of other things. So I'm not sure how to work with that quite yet.
So, and that's where I think all of it, that's a whole society kind of problem. Like we welcome folks here for sure. I've yet to meet a parent who uses really forced kinds of discipline. I've yet to meet a parent in my 20 plus years of doing this who feels good about it. Like, that's not necessarily, it perhaps is the way they were parented.
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily feel good to them.
Yeah.
But they don't know an alternative.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally had that experience of, I need this to get done. I don't know how to get it to get done. My instinct is to yell or demand or use my power to do it. And I don't want that, but I don't have any experience with what the alternative is. And I'm reading all the blogs and I'm just like feeling judged on the one hand. I'm feeling inadequate on the other hand. I'm trying not to let those feelings get in the way of being present with my child. I want them to feel seen and supported and all of those things. I mean, it was just a constant swirl of those conflicting feelings and just being like, but I don't know what to do. And we've got to get where we're going. And I'm impacted by the state of chaos around me. I need it to be orderly and I don't have anyone to like lean on. And so I have a lot of empathy for that situation. And I completely forgot what we were talking about and why I was saying that in the first place. But I think what I came to with my kids is really what I focus on the most is like creating the space where they make choices and understand the impact of their choices and that they're making them consciously and mindfully. And so then I can let go of what I think it should look like versus how I think it should come about, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. And, and connecting that to the experience of trying to create the space for yourself to be able to think through some of those things. Because that is how we break those patterns or create just some intentional new pattern that we want to have in our own parenting is we have to think about it. We have to think about our reactions. We have to think about kind of why we were trying to make a particular thing happen, where we felt helpless, where we feel de-skilled. And because parenting itself is a skill set that none of us are born knowing how to do. And if we parent in a way where we either completely replicate what our parents did or go in the complete opposite direction, it's still not necessarily an intentional way of parenting that will result in kids thriving and being safe and so on. So there's so much complexity to this. One of the things I wish for all parents to know, and something I had to work on myself, is that there's so much judgment coming at parents in this society about like how to do it right. There's a million books. There's a million influencers out there. There's so much judgment around that, and I see that in these offices where parents will come in and there's some fear that they're going to be judged, and I know like I'm sitting in a place of not judging, I'm sitting in a place of wanting to be supportive and helpful and make whatever they would like to have happen in their relationship with their child more effective. But it's a wild world out there when it comes to trying to navigate parenthood. And then that's before we even talk about things like adding on other levels of societal oppression and financial strain and on all of that. Complicated.
Parenting philosophies have changed wildly over the years, and some of them have been proven to be really harmful. And so if we are carrying those, and you have the residual impacts around you coming at you at all times, and you're trying to break out of it. It's full-time, at least a part-time job on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So distilled down, when I think about I think about the museum. I think about here at MAPS. I think about like when we do therapy with children, we play and we train parents how to play with their kids and we do that not because it's fun. It is fun on some level, but we do it because it's effective. Yeah. Like play truly is the work of childhood. And then our society makes us stop playing as we become adults. And that's kind of bananas to me because it's so helpful.
Or it implies that you have to have alcohol in order to play.
Yes.
But
no.
That's a whole other podcast, but.
No, but that's true. That's true. That the permission to have fun has to somehow come from a place of being out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking, though, about the notion of how our culture devalues play in a lot of ways, except there's some communities, there's some, school-based philosophies and so on that really preserve play, throughout childhood, understanding that children learn best through play. That when something, and if you think about like a group of surly teenagers who don't want to be in a particular classroom, when you hear them talk about the classrooms where they are actually engaged, often that teacher is playful. Often that teacher has come up with some fun and different ways of communicating the information that incorporate playfulness. And then something different and magical happens in the learning process. And so the same thing happens in the process of psychotherapy, that when we use play, children are able to access things that that they wouldn't be able to access otherwise. And it's engaging and it builds connection. And when you see, there's a reason why like playing the game peekaboo is something so organic that we all tend to do. It's kind of this universal thing that happens across cultures in some different form. And it's this way we just sort of know to play. And there's this beautiful eye contact that happens. There's giggling that happens, and the bond forms. Like we know in our bones how to do this. And then we stop doing it and we stop playing with our children. And so that's part of why, I know I sound like I'm up on a soapbox right now, but that's part of why having you on was so important to me is in terms of what happens in our communities. I want people to be viewing children running around playing on the playground and parents playing with children as something that is productive. That it really truly is so very productive. It's the place where children learn conflict resolution. And when that creativity is sparked, they have better outcomes in terms of their reading and math scores. Like all sorts of cool things start to happen. And so knowing we have a children's museum in town where you're intentionally thinking about these things is, to me, very cool and a very positive thing. Yeah, it makes me very happy. Yeah, and there's a healing role that play plays in trauma process.
Yes.
Yeah. What has your experience been with that?
Yeah, I always think about when there was an earthquake in the D.C. area that put a big crack in the Washington Monument, and I was home alone with my little ones. My oldest and my middle were napping when it happened, and we had a 3-story townhouse. One was upstairs, and one was in the basement. And it takes a minute for you to realize something is happening, and then I'm on the middle floor, and I have to figure out who am I getting where. So I went up first to get the older one because I knew they could walk, and we had to step over glass to get down the stairs. Things had fallen off the walls. There was glass everywhere. It was shaking for a really long time, and then we went down to the basement to get the little one, and I didn't know. I went in the bathroom. I'm still not sure if that was the right safety move to make, but so that was a traumatic event for those two, right? Yeah. One was too young to really process it through play, but my oldest, we played that out over and over again. And it reminded them that, yep, we had to step over the glass, so we'll step over the glass to get out of the space. Like they replayed the event over and over again. And at the end, every single time we were okay. Every single time we were safe. And I felt like that was just what she needed to do to process it. And it was just the game that we were playing, that we have to climb over the glass now, and we have to go get the baby now, and then we have to sit in the bathroom. And like we replayed it over and over again as part of our play and then it would come up every year for a little while, and then every 2 years for a little while. And it's a memory that is a core memory for her, but she definitely, that's how we worked through it. We didn't sit down and talk about it and like be logical about it. We recreated it. We replayed it over and over again with that outcome of everybody was safe at the end and nothing really bad happened. And we cleaned everything up and everything went back to safe and normal, and it hasn't happened again. It still hasn't happened again. You know what I mean? So, I think that and people will compulsively replay things if they don't get that time to process it intentionally, relive it, work through it. And I think there's lots of different modalities of therapy that does that without the play. But for a kid,
but for little ones, the play,
language.
like sitting here, I know that you weren't the one who introduced to your child, let's play earthquake.
Nope.
That she organically did that because kids know how to work through what they need to work through emotionally, and they do it through play. Yeah. They really do. And you as the parent had the wisdom to be with her and allow that to happen and to let it replay as many times as it needed to. And that was really useful for her in her own emotional processing. That's so cool that kids blow my mind with that all the time. Yeah. And if we kind of take their, and this to me also kind of gives a really important distinction of play is used for lots of different reasons in childhood. And not all play is to process trauma and emotion, right. But when it is, you can see it because it's repetitive. It's the same themes over and over and over again. And that's one of the ways as a parent, which I think this is kind of cool. Like this was something that, I learned through the process of becoming a psychologist. And then, when watching my own child, I could see it when it was happening, and being in my sessions, I can see it when it's happening. That you can see the moment where a child is, if they're playing, they're doing their thing. And then you can see when it becomes something they're emotionally processing. It's sort of like when a tone changes in a conversation with an adult where you have the feeling of like, oh, okay, things are getting serious now. The same thing happens in the play with a child. And it's often that sort of that over and over again. Their tone changes, their focus changes, and they
look at you.
And they look at you. Yeah.
And they look at you for your response because they're asking you a question with their behavior. Yeah. They're asking you a question in the language of play.
Yeah. And so your daughter going through that process after that earthquake of playing that out with you would be the same thing as like a 20-year-old, if your daughter had been 20 at the time, saying, Mom, this is still really bothering me. I keep thinking about the glass. I keep thinking about the house shaking. I was worried about, my younger sibling.
I got chills.
But you playing it out was allowing those conversations to happen. And that's what I hope as a society we can kind of really embrace that and understand that the more we create spaces and places for children to play and be with their caregivers in that play, that's really helpful because ultimately, as a therapist, I'm happy to be there with a family and support that process and support the play that is meant for therapeutic reasons. That's why insurance companies reimburse this because it has an evidence base. There's a reason we do it. But my goal always is to teach parents what I know how to do with play because then they can do it all week long with their kid. And it's way more impactful than being in my office for a week, So it's really, it's so cool that your daughter just knew to do that.
They all know to do that.
They all know to do that.
That's just, that's their language. Yeah.
That is their language. Yeah. And that's where also I think that, and I know we're kind of, there's a million different directions we've been going in with this. And so I thank our listeners for appreciating the sort of bopping around that we've been doing. But this too, this is when adults come together and are trying to dig through a concept. There's this idea that like we're sitting together, so everything must be perfectly linear and perfectly clear. But life is messy, and these concepts are not simplistic. And so I get kind of this vision of like we're digging through something and sorting through, and keep finding little things in this particular mix of in front of us. And every time we pull one out, it's like, oh hey, there's this piece and there's that piece. And I hope what everybody hears is that there's a complexity to this.
Sure.
That there's a really that none of this is simple, and yet there are some simple pathways through it, like the act of sitting with a child and playing, or as an adult, allowing yourself to exist in some playfulness. That is a way of moving through some of these very intense emotional experiences that we have. And folks who've had the higher ACEs scores often also did not get as much time to be playful and to have that time in childhood to really, really just be joyful and play. Yeah. And so it's necessary to keep doing it in your adult life.
Yeah. I definitely still have to work at it a little bit sometimes and shift my thinking and just clear that it's kind of a block right around this place in my body where I have to just okay. It's really time to just let everything else fall away and be in this moment and enjoy this moment. Just let that joy flow through, and let things be fun. Because there's just this creative capacity that's always available to us that we really, if we practice, we can access it at any time, and it can really make hard things easier. Even to just take that space and let your body practice relaxing. It's okay to relax and have fun. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah. And it feels, for those of us with the higher ACEs scores, it often, like you said, it feels kind of counterintuitive. Yeah. That there's a practice behind it. Yeah. And so I imagine that in the museum as well, that you're observing quite a lot, and as community members, we are sort of observing each other and observing each other's parenting. And if we want to move in this direction where we can be supportive as a community of other parents, and then I think also, as the mother of somebody whose child is almost an adult now, I have gained some experience. There are some things I've learned, and I feel terrible when I see a parent and a child together, and I can see that the parent is just at their wits' end, and they don't know what else to do. And so I wonder, what do you see in the museum?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I'm developing discernment in a new area now, and I feel like it's an opportunity to sort of practice before my kids have kids, if they do, because I have the experience of adults who have grown children trying to be supportive or trying to influence or impact how things go down with my kids. And so now I get to sit and see parents going through some of the things that I went through and wanting to be able to help and not knowing exactly always when, where, and how to do that. Like when they're trying to leave and the child's having a meltdown, and I can see that the parent is just like, they need that extra something, and maybe I can be like, did you get your sticker on the way out? And like 90% of the time, if I just say, did you get your sticker on the way out? The crying stops immediately. They get their sticker, and I say, like, put it on in the car. Yeah. So then their mind goes to the car, and the parent has an easier time getting the kid out. And then sometimes if I say, did you get your sticker? The kid like freaks out even more. And now I'm making it harder for the parent. Right. So there's a thing that I'm learning right now. Like when to step in or when not to step in. But I think it's pretty easy to tell people that judging is never going to help.
It's never going to help.
It's never going to help anybody to be negative, to judge, or to tell people they can't, or this or that. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
It's always like, how can I be supportive? And if I can't be supportive, I need to go away.
Need to step back.
Exactly.
I have these two very distinct moments of my own parenting where that were very impactful. One where I did experience a great deal of judgment, and it made me feel more isolated and alone. So my child was a toddler and did not want to be in the shopping cart, and so was allowed to be out of the shopping cart, but I needed her to stay right with me. And she thought at that point in time that it was really fun to just bolt and laugh. Yeah. And so the end result was that she needed to stay in the shopping cart, and she was very upset about this, as a toddler might be very upset about this. And the parenting approach I was taking in that moment, there was nothing punitive. It was just sort of the natural consequence of, if you can't stay right by me, you're going to have to be in the cart. So she's in the cart and she's crying. And I was with her and I was there, but I was continuing my shopping and then continuing to reassure her that, she was going to be okay. And a woman came up, and I think, again, the best of intentions. It's making her uncomfortable. There's a child crying, it's making her very, very uncomfortable. And she came over to my child and put her and touched my child and said, "I'm so sorry that your mommy's not comforting you." And it was really hard. It was a really hard moment for me. I felt misunderstood. I felt judged. And I also felt like, I need you to get your hands off my kid.
Right on.
That's my baby. And so I had that moment, which was sort of the worst of the experiences. And then it also brewed in my mind, did I do something wrong? There was nothing helpful about it. Another moment, and this is the story I think I had shared with you. So this was when my daughter was 3 years old. My husband and I took her down to Philadelphia because there was a museum we were going to go to. Children's museums are one of my favorite places on this planet. So there's a children's museum we were going to go to, and we were visiting a family friend. So the family friend was going to work, and we were going to have the day to go out to the Please Touch Museum, which is a really cool museum. And we needed to take the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. So SEPTA is what the public transportation is called down in Philadelphia. So we were going to take a SEPTA bus out to the Children's Museum. And, we've got our strollers and diaper bag. We've got the whole thing. We're ready to go with our little 3-year-old. And we go to the bus station we're supposed to go to. We get onto the bus and we're feeling good. We can do this today. And so as we move through Philadelphia, going to the different stops, people are getting on, people are getting off. More stops, people are getting on, people are getting off. And I knew the museum was sort of more on the outskirts of the city, so it felt normal and reasonable that we were still on this bus. And then eventually we started getting to these stops where people were getting off and no one was getting on. More stops, people getting off, no one getting on. And then we're the last, these are these huge, huge buses. So they're, and we're way kind of in the back of the bus. And then all of a sudden, we're the last ones on the bus, and the bus pulls into this huge bus depot, parks, and turns off. And then the bus driver turns around to check the bus and sees that we're back there, and he says, what the heck are you guys still doing on my bus? And my husband and I, in that moment, the layers of like, we've messed up, we don't know where we are, what's happening, the self-judgment that was coming at us, and we're doing that. We're saying we were trying to go to the Please Touch Museum. He said, you are on the wrong bus, and we were just excoriating ourselves with self-judgment. How did we get on the wrong bus? We thought we got on the right bus. I can't believe we did this, and we are just imploding as parents. Absolutely imploding. And this gentleman, his name was Ed. And we affectionately in our family call him Septa Ed. So Ed, if you're out there, this is a pivotal parenting moment in our household that changed everything. So Septa Ed came to the back of the bus, and he took time, and he just sat down and looked at the two of us, and he said to us, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "Stop." He said, "Stop it." He said, "Your daughter is safe. You are safe because you're on my bus." And we both just stopped. Yeah, we just stopped, and we were quiet. And he said, "So this is what we're going to do." He said, "I'm going to go take my break, and you're going to sit here on this bus, and you're going to enjoy the day with your daughter because you are safe, and she is safe, and she's happy. And then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to tell you how to get to the museum." And he says, "You don't know what would have happened if you got on the right bus today." Mm-hmm. And he just really kind of gave us this insight into just be in the moment with your child, and it's okay. But he met the two of us where we were, and there was no judgment. There was no, you looked at the wrong schedule. Why did you look at the wrong schedule? There was no judgment coming from him at all. He was just emotionally supportive. And then we had a fantastic day once we actually got to the museum.
Be an Ed.
Be an Ed. Yeah.
And he didn't make it about him and how you're, and
he still took his break. He did what he needed to do.
He took care of himself, but he didn't put it on you.
No.
He worked with you. So that is what I aspire to be able to do for the families at the museum, and to demonstrate for other people to do that. Yeah. For families as well. I just think there are all these opportunities to show each other that there is care in the world, there is support in the world, there is community available to us. So, but we're all learning. We have to practice. But if we aspire to be like Ed, then maybe we can get somewhere, right?
I think that is the perfect place for us to wrap this up today. Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for being with us today. And to our listeners, as always, wherever you are on your path, we are honored to walk alongside you.